I want to speak to the specifics of the motion. First of all, I agree with my honourable friend, the member for Harwich and North Essex, that the constitutional innovation in this is deeply unsatisfactory. And as the honourable gentleman, the member for Carshalton and Wallington, rightly said, it is an indication that the House no longer has confidence in Her Majesty's government. The whole point of the government having control of the timetable is that that is an expression of confidence. I'm even quite sympathetic to the point made by the honourable gentleman, the member for the Rhondda. And it is the Fixed Term Parliaments Act that has created an element of constitutional muddle where we have a government that obviously doesn't contain or command the official confidence, but nonetheless carries on as if it did, and that we need to get to a situation where the business of the House and the government once more go together, because this approach is deeply unsatisfactory, because there is no means of holding anybody to account for it. That the motions here can be passed one way or another. They then go off to Europe to be discussed, if they are to be discussed, by people who don't believe in these motions, don't necessarily support these motions, and who may come back having failed, but because they haven't done it in a way the House might have liked. But the people who proposed the motions don't go out to discuss them with Brussels because they're not the government. And therefore having this approach leads ultimately to chaotic relationships between the legislature and the executive. But I also think, Mr. Speaker, that this motion itself is an unsatisfactory motion. If we look at 1C, notwithstanding the practice of the House, any motion on matters that have been the subject of a prior decision of the House in the current session may be the subject of a decision. Well, Mr. Speaker, as you pointed out to us, this is against the most ancient practice of the House, dating back to 1604. But it also seems to me that it's a considerable discourtesy to you personally, Mr. Speaker, because on Thursday you ruled that the government could not bring forward a paving motion to allow it to bring its motion forward again. A decision, I think, that everybody in the House accepted and thought was reasonable. And therefore I think to have slipped through in this motion under your nose something that allows a paving motion for motions that have already been determined is a discourtesy. And if I had been as discourteous as that to you, Mr. Speaker, I would not have the gall to move the motion standing in my name. Indeed, I would feel it necessary to make a public apology for such a shaming state of affairs. I give way the honourable gentleman.
Can I thank him for giving way? Isn't his real objection not that Parliament is trying to balance control back from the government, but that his power has been seriously weakened by Parliament asserting its own authority and trying to have a say to find a way forward?
What a waste of question.
The shame is not that Parliament's trying to wrestle power from the government, but that Parliament is wrestling power from 17.4 million people who voted to leave. And the shame, Mr. Speaker, is of people who stood on manifestos saying that they would respect the result of the referendum, and they did so when they spoke such, they did so with forked tongues. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm grateful to the honourable member for giving way. On the subject of shame and public apologies, I wonder if he might seize this opportunity to apologise for quoting, apparently approvingly, the leader of the AfD party, a far-right party in Germany this weekend.
Outrageous.
Mr. Speaker, I think it is reasonable to quote speeches made in the German Parliament. It is not as great a Parliament as this Parliament, or as noble a House as this chamber of the House of Commons, but nonetheless it is the chamber of a House of an important ally friend of ours, and what was said was extremely interesting. And just referring people to what has been said is not necessarily an endorsement. As the honourable gentleman may notice, I've just quoted from the text in front of us, not because I'm endorsing it, but because it's interesting and important. So the honourable gentleman perhaps should not jump to weird conclusions. But the other problem with this motion, Mr. Speaker, is the time that it allows for this debate. We have quite a number of motions before us, as we did yesterday, going up to H. Not yesterday. The honourable lady from a sedentary position, right honourable lady from a sedentary position, quite correctly corrects me that it was at the end of last week. We have up to H to debate, and the format of this motion leaves from between 6 o'clock plus divisions, so 6:15, to 8 o'clock for this to take place. Now, this seems to me a very rushed approach to debating these important issues. when the government was in control of the order paper, it allowed more days for debate than this motion allows hours. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Honourable member for giving way. If the honourable member were to conclude his speech and others would resist from debating in this part, we could get to the meat of the issue.
Congratulate the honourable gentleman. Had he not decided to intervene, I might have finished my comments, but now he has given me inspiration to carry on against this appalling motion that is fundamentally against the spirit of our Constitution. And I appeal to those who support this type of motion to have the courage of their convictions. If they really have no confidence in Her Majesty's government, let them vote that way. Let them go to their constituents and see if standing as independents how far they get. Let them see as socialists how many votes they will get. Let them see as independents how many votes they will get. They lack the courage of their convictions and therefore they try and undermine the Constitution by subterfuge. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
On the matter of the courage of our convictions, just a few months ago, the honourable member voted that he had no confidence in the Prime Minister as the leader of his party, and then subsequently voted that he had confidence in someone he had no confidence in to lead his party, to lead the country. What kind of courage of convictions is that?
The honourable gentleman misses the rather obvious point. I have much more confidence in my right honourable friend, the member for Maidenhead, to lead the country, or indeed anybody sitting on these benches, than I do in his honourable friend, the member for Islington. It seems to me a really very straightforward choice, and of course I back a Tory against a socialist. Of course I'll give way to the right honourable lady.
There is an interesting point the honourable gentleman raises about, the honourable gentleman talked about courage of convictions. Could he like to tell the House why it is that a few weeks ago he voted against the government's withdrawal agreement, but on Friday he voted for it, and why he's entitled to a vote and to change his mind, but the people of this country are not allowed to change their minds and have a people's vote?
I'm deeply grateful to the right honourable lady for intervening. It is much appreciated because it allows me to point out to her that the right honourable lady, the foremost campaigner for a second referendum, the right honourable lady who favours votes at every opportunity, except when, having stood as a Conservative, she does not offer herself to her constituents, to them to decide whether they wish to have somebody who has turned their coat as their member of Parliament. So I think that, would the... If the right honourable lady wishes to appeal for the Chiltern Hundreds, I will of course give way.
Order, just before the right honourable lady intervenes, we are in danger of straying somewhat from the narrow ambit of the business of the House motion, to which I hope we will return. Anny Soubry.
Well, I think it is important to record that, of course, the majority of people in Broxtowe did not vote Conservative. And like all honourable and right honourable members, I seek to represent all my constituents, as we should all do, putting them and our country before narrow sectarian party interests.
Let them decide.
Mr. Speaker, what was it that the late Earl of Beaconsfield said of Mr. Gladstone? A prolix rhetorician inebriated by the exuberance of his own verbosity. I would not dream of saying such a thing about the right honourable lady. Let me return to the motion in hand, which is discourteous to you, Mr. Speaker, does not allow sufficient time for debate. I won't give way again, because others, with my apologies, is discourteous to you, limits time for debate, and is fundamentally against the Constitution.
Thank you. Very well, and then I'll call Kate Hoey next. Point of order, Mr. Tom Bray.
I wonder whether, in relation to the comments that the member has just made, whether he would like to correct the record. It's very clear from the tweet from the AFD that he retweeted that, in fact, he was endorsing the statement that had been made by that member of a far-right party in the German Parliament.
Well, the answer to that is that every member is responsible for the truth of what he or she says in the chamber. If a member feels that he or she has inadvertently erred, it is incumbent upon the member to correct the record. The honourable gentleman will have heard what the right honourable gentleman for Cashington and Wallington has said and will make his own judgment as to its merit.